There were 6 of us when we went into the Louisiana Bayou in September of 1998, and only 2 of us ever came back out. Officially, the mission never existed. Officially, the men who died were victims of a drug trafficking ambush. What actually happened down there is something the US military refuses to acknowledge. And if this account ever vanishes, or if I do, then you'll understand exactly why I waited so long to tell it. My name is Jack Rowland. At the time, I was a lieutenant commander assigned to SEAL Team 4, and what you're about to hear is the only version of Operation Blackwater that hasn't been erased. The briefing was dull in a way that felt almost insulting. Fluorescent lights, stale coffee, and a PowerPoint that could have passed for any routine interdiction op. Deep swamp surveillance. 72 hours. Observe, document, extract. No arrests, no engagements. Joint Special Operations Command had been quietly inserting teams into regions the DIA couldn't reach. Places where traffickers moved freely through terrain that swallowed evidence and people alike. The Louisiana Bayou was one of those places. We were told it was low risk, low visibility, and unlikely to escalate. In my experience, those were always the missions that went bad. Our team was solid. 6 men who had trained together long enough to read each other without speaking. I was team lead. Chief Miles Carter was my right hand, a career operator with a voice that stayed calm no matter how ugly things got. Luke Hensley handled comms, brilliant with radios and encryption, but young enough that he still joked before missions. Aaron Pike was our medic, quiet, methodical, the kind of guy you trusted instantly. Noah Bell carried the heavy weapons and had a laugh that echoed too loud in quiet rooms. And then there was Ghost. That wasn't his real name. Obviously, we never used it. He earned the call sign because he moved through terrain like he didn't exist. No broken branches, no ripples. You could turn around and swear he hadn't been there a second earlier. We inserted just after nightfall. The helicopter hovered low, rotors chopping humid air thick with insects. When we fast roped down, our boots hit water instead of ground. Black water knee-deep, cold in a way that didn't match the air. The helicopter lifted away almost immediately, and with it went the last familiar sound. The bayou closed in around us, not visually but emotionally, like stepping into a room where a conversation had just stopped. The swamp was loud, but not in a living way. Frogs croaked without rhythm. Insects buzzed in uneven waves. Every splash echoed too long. It felt less like an ecosystem and more like something imitating one. We moved slowly, single file, Ghost on point, infrared sweeping across tangled roots and hanging moss. There were no stars visible through the canopy. Even the moonlight seemed to get lost before it reached the water. About 3 hours in, Ghost stopped so suddenly, I almost ran into him. He raised a fist, then crouched, pointing down. I waded forward and saw them. Tracks pressed deep into the mud at the water's edge. They weren't gator, too round. Not bear either, too smooth. They looked like handprints but larger than any human, with too many impressions, like fingers that didn't quite know how many there should be. The mud around them was disturbed in a pattern I didn't like. The tracks came straight toward where we'd been standing, then veered away, curving off into deeper water. Whatever made them hadn't stumbled onto us. It had approached deliberately, then changed its mind. We logged it, photographed it, and moved on, but the mood shifted. Jokes stopped. Radio stayed silent except for essential checks. As the night deepened, something else changed. The swamp began to quiet, not gradually but all at once. Frogs stopped mid-call. Insects vanished. Even the water seemed to still. That kind of silence presses on your ears. Then we heard breathing. Slow, heavy, rhythmic. Not close enough to see, but close enough to feel through the water. Through night vision, I caught movement at the edge of the tree line. Tall, wrong. It didn't walk so much as slide, like it wasn't fully solid. Every instinct in my body told me to open fire, but there was nothing concrete to aim at. By sunrise it was gone. No tracks, no disturbances. Just the sense that we hadn't imagined it, that something had circled us all night, and decided we weren't worth the effort. Luke tried to joke about swamp gas and imagination, but his laugh cracked halfway through. At 04:00 the next morning, Luke shook me awake so hard, my hand went straight to my sidearm. His face was pale, eyes wide. He pressed his headset into my hand and told me to listen. At first, I heard nothing but static. Then, I noticed a pattern beneath it. A rhythm that matched our earlier transmissions. Something was repeating the cadence, not the words, like it was learning how we spoke. Then a voice cut through, so clear it felt like it was whispering directly into my ear. "We see you." Luke told me it had been happening for 10 minutes. The radio hadn't been compromised, the signal wasn't external, it was coming from everywhere. At first light, Ghost signaled again and took us off route. He'd found something he hadn't reported over comms. Concrete ruins half submerged and choked with vines. The kind of structure you only see when nature has been trying to bury it for decades. Inside, rusted equipment sat frozen in place. Old gauges, water level charts. The most recent date written on one of them stopped me cold. 1957. On the far wall, half hidden by moss, someone had painted words in flaking white. It never left. "Stay out of the water. If you hear it breathing, run." We tried to call for extraction. The radio cut out mid-transmission, not with static, but with a clean, dead silence. Like someone had unplugged the world. I remember thinking we'd crossed some kind of invisible boundary, something mapped long before we were born. That night, the lights appeared. Pale orbs drifting just above the surface of the water, moving slowly, deliberately, as if searching beneath them, stood something massive, tall enough that its outline blocked the trees behind it. It breathed like a machine straining under its own weight. Then, it spoke again. The same voice. "We see you." Before anyone could react, something surged from the water and wrapped around Luke's legs. He screamed once before he was pulled under. We fired until the swamp lit up with muzzle flashes, but there was nothing solid to hit. No blood surfaced, no bubbles. Luke was just gone. Panic set in. Training kept us moving, but discipline was cracking. We fell back toward the ruins, toward the only solid structure we'd seen. As we regrouped, Ghost pointed to something else painted on the concrete, hidden beneath vines. "They feed it. It lives in the well. Do not look inside." I looked anyway, and the moment I did, I knew we'd made a mistake. We wouldn't survive. The well wasn't deep the way you'd expect. It was wide, concrete-lined, and filled with a darkness that felt thick, like fog you could drown in. When my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't empty. It was breathing. The surface inside shifted and rolled, not like water but like flesh layered over itself. Then, eyes opened. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. All at once, all focused upward. Focused on me. The air around the well vibrated, and from the swamp beyond the ruins came a sound that felt like panic, not from us, but from the things we'd been seeing. The tall shapes weren't predators. They were guards. And whatever lived in that well was the reason. The ground trembled, subtle at first, then stronger, like something massive adjusting its position. The water around us rippled in expanding circles. We didn't wait for orders, we ran. Formation dissolved into survival. The lights in the swamp multiplied, drifting faster now, erratic, like insects disturbed from a nest. Aaron slipped first, pulled under by something that never surfaced. Noah tried to reach him and disappeared seconds later, dragged sideways into the trees with a sound I still hear when it's quiet. I remember Ghost moving ahead of me faster than I'd ever seen him move, not stealthy anymore, just desperate. Miles was shouting coordinates into a dead radio, his voice cracking for the first time I'd ever heard. The swamp shook harder now, trees swaying as if something enormous was rolling beneath the surface. Then, impossibly, we heard rotors. A helicopter. Low and fast, cutting through the canopy. We fired flares without thinking. It hovered just long enough for us to grab the skids. As we lifted, I looked down and saw the water, moving in patterns too large to be natural, like the surface of something alive turning over in its sleep. The debrief lasted 12 hours. A windowless room, men in uniforms without insignia. They told me I was hallucinating. They told me prolonged exposure to the swamp had triggered stress-induced psychosis. They told me Luke, Aaron, and Noah were casualties of hostile human activity. Every piece of evidence we'd gathered vanished. The ruins never existed. The well was never there. I signed papers I wasn't allowed to read. Operation Blackwater was erased. Miles tried to fight it. He filed reports, demanded reviews. They retired him early. He started calling me late at night asking if I'd seen lights near my house, asking if I could hear breathing when everything else went quiet. He died last year, heart attack, they said. I didn't go to the funeral. I couldn't stand near water that day. I've spent decades pretending it was over, pretending the bayou kept its secrets. But sometimes, late at night when the world goes quiet all at once, I hear it again, slow, heavy breathing. And I know we didn't escape, because it couldn't reach us. We escaped because it let us go. If you ever find yourself deep in the Louisiana Bayou, and the swamp falls silent, and you see lights drifting where nothing should be, don't investigate. Don't wait. Run, because whatever lives down there has been watched, fed, and hidden for longer than any of us have been alive. And it's still hungry.